Are you old enough to remember when the news came in the mail? A long time ago, video game news wasn't just a refresh on Twitter, or it wasn't just an upload to YouTube. We found out our news through magazines that came in the mail. Now, in the late '90s, people were online, but if you were like me and you were like 8, 9, 10 years old, you weren't getting your news online. You were waiting for the first week of the month for your latest issue of your favorite video game magazine, which, of course, for me was Nintendo Power. And the most awesome time of year was May, June, that time when E3 was happening. Now, we didn't know, or at least I didn't know back in the day, that E3 took place in May, and sometimes it took place in June. It kind of went back and forth when it was moving from LA to Atlanta. But all I knew was that every May or every June, there'd be this little blurb on the front of the magazine that said E3 showstoppers, or E3 previews, and I would just know, hey, this is the time of year when new video games are announced. So I thought it'd be cool to look back at some magazine scans from Nintendo Power 1999, from the May, June, and July issues, and even from the October issue, which we'll talk about that, what that significance of that is in a minute. But we're just going to look through these scans, and hopefully this is something that you enjoy. If you do, let me know. But back in these days, we basically were living off the hype of a thumbnail. A thumbnail on YouTube. Hey, I'll click on the link because the video looks cool. But in these days, there were these like postage stamp, these thumbnail size screenshots that would blow our mind when we would open a magazine. So E3 1999, or the preview for E3 1999, Nintendo Power, the issue had episode 1 Pod Racer on the cover, but little did I know what I was going to find out as I turned the page to the E3 preview. And the first page showed some screenshots of Donkey Kong 64, and one of the screenshots did not have Donkey Kong in it. It had who we now know as Chunky Kong riding a minecart over this landscape, this kind of over thin air. And then there was another screenshot of Donkey Kong swinging from a vine. So I remember being so hyped for Donkey Kong. You guys don't understand nowadays. Donkey Kong is kind of this also ran like fourth or tier franchise for Nintendo. It's tragic because back in the '90s, Donkey Kong was the number one franchise for Nintendo. Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 were super hype on Super Nintendo. And coming into the N64 era, we just thought, hey, Donkey Kong's going to rule the world. Mario's old, he's slow, those graphics are ugly, Donkey Kong Country's where it's at. And then Rare decided, hey, we're going to make new things like Banjo-Kazooie. And of course, they did GoldenEye and Blast Corps. And they would talk about Donkey Kong, Ultra Donkey Kong, or Donkey Kong 64. And it was kind of always written about in text in magazines. But Nintendo Power didn't want to mention it because they knew it's going to be a while. And it was going to be the big game of 1999. And Donkey Kong 64 was kind of their headliner for the E3 showcase. But I remember reading these magazines and looking at these thumbnails thinking, wow, what is that game going to look like when it's played in motion? Also, E3 99, one of the big games was going to be a little known game called Eternal Darkness, which would turn out to be a GameCube game. But, we saw these screenshots of this knight and this skeleton and these corridors. Like, wow, is this like Resident Evil meets medieval times? And of course, Pokemon was just getting super big at this time. Pokemon Red and Blue had come out the fall before in America, and Pokemon had been in Japan for a few years. We didn't know that. So Pokemon was going to be a big part of E3 99 for Nintendo. Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Stadium. Snap was coming out like a couple weeks after E3. Stadium was going to be coming out the following year, but little did we know, Pokemon Stadium had been out in Japan for a year. And Pokemon Stadium 2 was coming to America as Pokemon Stadium. And then there were these screenshots of Mario Golf. And then there was these screenshots of these other Rare games. Jet Force Gemini, which looked like something we'd never seen from Rare before. Because we'd seen GoldenEye, we'd seen these platformers, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, Donkey Kong now, and then Jet Force Gemini looked like this weird, like, is this Metroid? These vehicles, what is this going to be like? Which that was kind of cool. Looking back on Ubisoft was a big supporter of the Nintendo 64 at the time. Ubisoft was kind of a newcomer on the scene. Now they're everywhere, which is the name of the company, Ubiquitous Software. Back in these days, they weren't so ubiquitous, but they were. Here's the thing about Nintendo 64 games. There were these games that were announced, and it was like every year they were still being talked about. We think there are games now, there's specific games now that are like, development forever, that, every Nintendo Direct they come back up, or every, E3 or every showcase, hey, that game's there again. Back in the day, the N64 games, it was like there was these games announced in 96, 97 that just never came out. I mean, it was like 96, 97, 98, 99. Rayman 2 was one of those games. The first Rayman came out in 1995. The sequel was announced probably 97, and it was shown in 98. Going to come out this fall. Didn't. It was going to come out in the spring of 99. Finally came out in the fall of 99. There were another one of those games that was just forever talked about was Duck Dodgers in the 23rd Century, which these games, Rayman 2 turned out to be good. This game wasn't that good, but it was almost like the N64 was just this so tough to develop for. Then it's neat to look back on now. There's this little company called Rockstar that had formerly was called DMA Design, that had made Silicon Valley, and made Body Harvest, and now they're called Rockstar, and they're making Bass Hunter for the Nintendo 64. So yeah, Nintendo really didn't realize who they would go on to be, right? Then the next issue of Nintendo Power, this really got me hyped. The June issue that had Pokemon Snap on the cover. The June issue in the Pack Watch section, which was where they always stuffed all the news at the back of the magazine. They always stuffed the news, and it would be like, you read the magazine, okay, here's the games coming out, here's the previews of games that are about to come out, here's the reviews, here's the cheat codes, and in the very back would be this blowout of games that you never heard of before. So it's like you're almost done with the magazine, and you knew that next turn was going to be mind-blowing. Pack Watch, June 1999. First thing I see is Kirby at the top. Then I see a Mario game, and then I see Mickey Mouse. And of course, for kids reading the magazine, this was just this, wow, I cannot believe this. So Kirby had been announced as Kirby Air Ride years before, never came out. Again, one of those games that just was every year, is Kirby coming, is Kirby coming? Finally, he's back. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Super Mario Adventure, which we had seen grainy screenshots of a game called Super Mario RPG 2 from the year before. This looks similar. And then there's this image of Mickey Mouse. And if you read the article, it says that Mickey Mouse was going to be basically one of Nintendo's big franchise character for the Nintendo 64's remainder of its life. And they were partnering with Rare to make Mickey Mouse games for the Game Boy Color and the Nintendo 64, and for the next generation Nintendo consoles, which this is kind of the first mention of the next generation system for Nintendo. We find out later at this E3 they announced it, but this article is the first mention of a new Nintendo console that was coming. And here's more about the Mario and Kirby game. So we have Paper Mario, which is the sequel. And at the time, this was going to be the sequel. And if you played Paper Mario, you know that it's got similar themes as Super Mario RPG. Now the Paper Mario series is completely turned aside from the Mario RPG roots, not just gameplay-wise, but the story, the 7 stars and all that. That's part of Paper Mario. So Paper Mario, or Super Mario Adventure, and then Kirby 64. And the article says, hey, Kirby 64, this is not Kirby Air Ride. This is a new kind of 2.5D hybrid 3D adventure where you play as Kirby and even some new characters. So that was cool. Here's some new screenshots of Donkey Kong 64. You see this giant Kremlin. You see more Chunky Kong. You see more Jet Force Gemini. So then the July 1999 issue of Nintendo Power, that's where we actually get the E3 report. So E3 would have happened, and it was going to be in the magazine this month. So some of the games that the games that we're going to talk about, we've already mentioned Donkey Kong, Pokemon, but the first thing that we learn about in the E3 blowout is not a game, but a system. It's the Dolphin. The Dolphin was announced. We heard about it from the Mickey Mouse article, but the Dolphin was announced. It was going to be Nintendo's next generation console. It was going to be a partnership with Panasonic, and it was going to play DVDs, and it was going to be this super powerful system. Now, we had been calling the system Nintendo 2000. In the magazines, Electronic Gaming loved to just make up names for consoles, so the name of it was Nintendo 2000. Nintendo comes out and says, our next system is going to be called the Dolphin. The IBM processor is called the Gecko, and then there's the Flipper chip. It's these really weird code names. So yeah, that E3 1999 was not just Donkey Kong, not just Pokemon, but it was about the dolphin. But Nintendo had more to say in 1999, and they always did this. Every year they would do a little bit at E3, but their big showcase and their big blowout for the future was at their own show later in the year called Space World. It used to take place around Thanksgiving, and then they moved it up to around August in the late 90s. So Nintendo would give you a little bit, would give the American audience a little bit. Basically, E3 was a marketing show. Hey, this is what's coming out this fall. Space World was their future showcase. So here we are reading the October issue of Nintendo Power in 1999, and we turn the page to the very back, and the top of the screen we see Zelda Gaiden. I called it Gaiden back then, but Zelda Gaiden. I'm like, well, this is crazy. A new 3D Zelda, and in the screenshot you can see it's a Goron with Link's hat on, so some sort of transformation. So Nintendo Space World 1999, we see these really cool, kind of really colorful screenshots of this new Zelda game, this 1 year Zelda game. They're going to take the assets of Ocarina of Time and make a brand new Zelda game. And we see this Mario artist, a Mario with an artist hat on, so maybe a sequel to Mario Paint. And then we see some more titles. And again, Space World was where you had those games that were just continually showing up. There's the Kirby game, but then there's Mother 3 or Earthbound 64. That game was announced back at Space World 1996. Here it is again, not 3 years later, and it never comes out, by the way, right? There's new Mario Party, Custom Robo. There's Mario RPG 2, which we'd learned it was called Mario Adventure. Now it's back to Mario RPG 2. There's Doshin the Giant, which was again one of those grainy screenshots they would show in the Space World show previews. There's Pokemon Gold and Silver, which if you know anything about Pokemon Gold and Silver, like there's these like just various versions that was shown first at Space World 97, 98, 99. Each version is completely different. And you should look up some of that stuff. That's really cool. So yeah, Space World. There also the announcement of these new Zelda games, the Game Boy Color games that look similar to Link's Awakening. The Zelda Fruit of the Mysterious Tree. It was going to be initially this trio of games, this trilogy, this 3 different games that were made in partnership with Capcom. One was going to be a remake of Zelda 1, and 2 other games that ended up being the Oracle games, Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons. And the N64 disc drive kind of had its last hurrah at the Space World 99. There was going to be a Mario Paint game. There was going to be F-Zero expansion, so on and so forth. So that's really what it was like back in the 90s when you were trying to find new information about new games. You just had to wait for magazines to come in the mail. And man, it was so cool turning the page and seeing something that you didn't even know existed, 10 minutes before. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you're interested in more content like this, I would love to look at some more old magazine scans with you. Take care.